Welcome in to the Eyes on Texas multicast. It's our second edition of the week. That's right. It's the Friday preview edition. Texas and Iowa State, one of two remaining Big 12 games, regular season games for the Longhorns, who come in with a lot on the line. They're sitting at 6-1, sitting atop the Big 12 conference, and a chance with a win here to really secure and lock up a spot in the Big 12 title game in Arlington. There are four teams chasing Texas that have two losses, including Iowa State. So safe to say, pretty darn big football game at Jack Trice Stadium in Ames, Iowa, Saturday night. And we're going to preview it for you from all angles. Offense for Texas against that Iowa State flyover defense, and John Heacock, Texas defense against that Iowa State offense, and of course the special teams and the big picture conversation about the Longhorns. We come into you live from the capital city of the great state of Texas, Austin, Texas. We are the weekly broadcast, now bi-weekly, that understands that the pride and tradition of the Texas football program will never be entrusted to the timid of the week. It is the Eyes on Texas multicast, product of the Republic of Football on Dave Campbell's Texas Football Podcast Network, powered by our presenting partner at Grande Equipment and our four other founding partners, or presenting partners, we should say. We appreciate them. I'm Aaron Hogan, morning show host at The Horn here in Austin, hornfm.com. He is the senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Our man, Mike Craven, on the multicast that keeps you on top of all things Texas football. Also a little Big 12 and coaching news we'll get to coming up in our Friday edition, brought to you by Grande Equipment. Mike, how are you? You ready for a game weekend?
I am. During coaching season, which started a little bit earlier this year with A&M dipping their toe into the pool, you kind of start to forget that there's still football to be played as you get buried into sourcing that and texting every single coach that you know. I'm glad the weekend's going to be here, though, to get us back on the football field, because we only got a couple of weeks left, and then we'll be in the offseason complaining about not having any football.
That's right. That's right. We'll talk to you about the mood you're hearing out of Baggy Land, and I've heard conflicting reports of how quickly they'd like to do this and have someone in place. I mean, you don't move on Jimbo Fisher if you're not going to have someone in place by early December. So we'll look at some candidates and talk about how it impacts the dominoes in the state of Texas. Obviously, we'll talk Texas and Iowa State. It is the broadcast that is presented by Wes Murray and his team at Grande Equipment. They understand when you have a project to achieve and you need heavy equipment of any kind, however much you need, your reputation is all you have. You have that project, you got to get it done on time, on budget. And that's why Grande is the perfect choice every time for you, for your heavy equipment, rentals and sales. They're going to partner with you on every project. That's how they've operated for 31 years. As Wes always tells me to tell you folks, they are not in the equipment business. They are in the relationship business. They're going to be with you whatever you need. As an independent dealer as well at Grande, they can get you any type of any brand of equipment. They're not locked into one like a lot of them are. Get you the Volvo, the Komatsu, the John Deere, the Caterpillar. Doesn't matter if you need it, they've got it for you every single time. It'll be job site ready and hassle-free every time. At Grande Equipment, find them online at grandeequipment.com. Huge Longhorn fans and huge fans of the Eyes on Texas multicast to keep up with the Horns and where they're headed. Where they're headed, Mike, is Ames, Iowa. And this is, I don't know, the game last week with TCU I had a real good feeling about. And obviously it got tenuous, but the Longhorns looked like they were on their way to routing TCU. K-State was a coin flip with Malik Murphy for me. This game kind of feels like that too, with the loss of Jonathan Brooks. I think this game could be a lot closer than a lot of Longhorn fans believe it can. What's your overall macro sense of this game when you look at it a day out?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, Texas should roll in this one, in my opinion. Iowa State's playing pretty good football, but if you look at their wins, they haven't beaten anybody that jumps off the page to me, that impresses me all that much. They've beaten a lot of teams that they probably should, and it kind of speaks to where the Big 12 is this year. Texas has the playmakers, Texas has the size up front. I think when Iowa State's had success against Texas in the past, it's because they've been able to bully the Longhorns to be more physical. It seems hard to do that against this Texas team. Iowa State's hope is the same hope that TCU and Kansas State had, that Texas doesn't bring their A game. And if they do early, that fades. My colleague Carter Yates at Dave Campbell's Texas Football dug into some numbers this week to kind of look at Sark's second half performances. It stops, before Texas. And this kind of dates back. He found, at Texas, Sark has been outscored in the second half 46% of the time. It's 16 of 35 games. At USC, it was 10 of 16 games, so 55% of the time. And then at Washington, it was 29 of 63 games, so that's 46% of the time. So, he hasn't been the greatest second half coach in the world. This is going to be one of the more important games in his coaching career. As I've mentioned, he's never won 10 games before. He's never coached in a conference game before, or conference championship game before, much less won a national championship, and then you remove Jonathan Brooks. I guess my biggest questions for this Texas team is, what is the offensive identity without Brooks? And then also, are they able to play a 4-quarter football game against a team that they should be more talented than?
Yep, those are all the questions. And look, let's not forget Iowa State. You know, my feeling on Matt Campbell, I think he's a really good football coach, and I know there's mixed reviews on him, but I do know, he came. His father was a pretty legendary high school coach in the state of Ohio, Massillon High School, Massillon, Ohio, kind of the Odessa Permian of Ohio football. That's where he grew up. So he grew up in that cradle of Rust Belt coaches. And then he cut his teeth at a place called Mountain Union, where he won 3 national championships on his way to Toledo, in the state of Ohio. And at Mountain Union, it's about preparing your team for the playoff, because what do you know, that level of college football has a playoff, and so that's kind of how he's trained. Just like in high school football, you can lose all your district games or non-district games and still make the playoffs and make a run. Same when at a place like Mount Union. So I do feel like that's still how he coaches his team. That they're going to get better as the year goes on. They're going to improve. So what you saw in September is not what you're going to see end of the year. I remember when this game came on the schedule, I was like, man, I'd much rather play an Iowa State team early than late. And I look at it and see that, when they played Oklahoma, Mike, right before Texas played Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, Oklahoma scored 50 points on this team. They beat them 50-20. So I think a lot of Longhorn fans look at that and say, well, then we should blow them out too. But if you watch this team, they beat BYU last weekend in Provo 45-13. They seem to be getting better. And that's not unlike an Iowa State team. And they also know last year in this game, they had every opportunity to beat Texas in Austin. It was a 27-24 final. We know Xavier Hutchinson, the now NFL receiver they had, dropped a touchdown pass that would have won the game. They also had a red zone interception. And then we know at the end of the game, there was the big Anthony Cook forced fumble that Jalen Ford recovered that was critical to the Longhorns winning. And, of course, I think we all remember Matt Campbell going off the field irate that they didn't call targeting. He thought it was a targeting call on his player. And, so there's some piss and vinegar coming here from Matt Campbell, I think. His team feels like they let one get away last year. And you've heard the offensive lineman for Iowa State. They got like starting guard popping off about, they don't know what they're in for. We're going to knock the entitlement out of that team. The defensive line isn't the best we faced. I mean, they're throwing bulletin board material out, Mike. What do you make of that? To me, that's crazy. Iowa State talking smack ahead of a game with Texas.
We talked about it on your show with Rod Babers this week. I'm a big fan of the trash talk. I grew up a wrestling fan. I love rap music. I think it's good for the game. I think it adds intrigue to this game. There's probably people that'll put an eye on this game that maybe wouldn't have otherwise, because there's a little bit of that noise coming out. I think once the first snap happens, T'Vondre Sweat's trying to win that game regardless if the guard talks trash or not. So I don't know how much it plays into an impact for the week, but Texas should have already been, like, if Texas needs extra motivation for this, like, that may be an issue already, right? I mean, like, everybody on this roster is playing for something that they've never been able to play for before. Like, you take away like Adonai Mitchell, who transferred in, and there's not many guys on this roster who have played for a conference championship or have been in a college football playoff race this far. And that includes a lot of the coaching staff as well. And so I think Texas is going to be dialed in for this one. They know how much is going to be on the line. I think if you're Iowa State, though, what's the point of not poking the bear? Like, you're motivating yourself as well, right? And it does feel like Iowa State takes pride in being kind of the antithesis of what they think Texas's program is. Like, they want to be the blue collar, tough. Like, what did he say? The 5-star culture, against the 5-star talent type team. And so Iowa State's leaning into it. They're not backing away. This is going to be a football game, and you're going to have to bring your big boy pants to play this one, because Iowa State's not going to back down. And I don't think that even with the trash talk that they're going to back down at all. Like, they're going to be in this football game. Texas is going to have to bring it for 4 quarters. Like Sark mentioned after the TCU game, this is the one. This is the game where they're going to need a complete football game, because Iowa State is not going to go away.
Agreed 100%. And it's a night game. They're going to, I think, be wearing their black uniforms, so the blackout will be in effect, which is fun. I think it's going to be a great scene. And let's see if the Longhorns can rise to that, because I think they're going to have that. It's got to be a K-State type of effort in my mind. It's got to be even Alabama. You got to play with that intensity. It's the Longhorns' really first true road game since the Alabama game. They haven't left the state of Texas, Mike. I mean, when you go to Fort Worth, you were there. A lot of Texas fans there. A lot of Texas fans in Houston when they went there. Cotton Bowl's a split crowd. So this is the first time since the Bama game that it's going to be truly a road environment. It's us against you, us against the world kind of thing, which may be good for Texas. A lot of times teams rally around that. I know Rod Babers, you mentioned him. He talked about that, man. When they went on the road, especially if they were a close team, which Sark has talked about how close this team is. If you're a close team, you get closer, a little longer road trip, no fans of yours there, except for maybe some small smattering. It feels like this team can rally around that.
Yeah, no doubt. And they should rally around the struggles that they've had the last couple of weeks, because it's always good to work on your negatives after a win. I know we make fun of the Tom Herman, it's tough to win, but it is. It's not an easy thing to do. You should celebrate wins. And they haven't been perfect wins, but they've been up 20 on two really good opponents these last 2 weeks, or at least two talented opponents these last 2 weeks. I believe Texas is more the team that they were up 26-6 on Kansas State and on TCU than they are the second half kind of blow it team. They're winning close in year three. We kind of talked about the Bobby Bowden message as well, where year one, you lose big, year two, you lose close, year three, you win close, and year four, you win big. Well, this is year three. This is the win close year. That's what Texas is able to do. I'd imagine this is going to be another close one. If you're Sark, you're telling your team this is going to be a 4-quarter football game. We're not going to blow this team out. And so I hope, I would think the experience over the last 2 weeks also helps this team, kind of prevail in a close one as well.
Yeah, can't let your foot off the gas. And you went through the stats that your colleague found about Sark, and that's because Sark was, when we played the cuts on our week first of the week episode. Sark was not happy, and he was upset with the body language of his team in the second half. They kind of did have the entitlement that they had this game licked, and TCU came and really took it to them and almost took the game. But same time, Sark's got to own his part of that. They only scored 3 points, Mike, in that second half. I mean, how many games would have Texas won this year if they only scored 3 points in the second half? I mean, you've got to do more offensively. That's where they stand right now, and let's hope they can do it, because it's proven to be, until last week, a pretty good fourth quarter team this year at closing games. But at the same time, they need to be a 4-quarter team, because I think they're kind of playing themselves out of the conversation for the 14 playoff at this point with these close losses. But at this point, you just got to win the Big 12, because if you lose this game, you find yourself into that tie with all the 2-loss teams, including Oklahoma, who beat you. Iowa State would have the win over you. So you put yourself in a precarious spot if you can't handle your business as an 8-point favorite, 8.5-point favorite coming up. So let's dive into the preview. We'll talk Texas offense against the Iowa State defense. That's going to be brought to you by our friends at One Source Gas. My buddy Richard Strever and his team at One Source Gas of Central Texas. If you have compressed gas needs, One Source Gas is always the call. They are the best. There's a reason they're growing like crazy. They started as a real small compressed gas company, but taking more and more market share because they're the best. And they do it better, more reliable. We'll tell you more about them coming up. But Mike, Quinn Ewers has to have a big game here, right? I mean, Jonathan, could we even put a value on how important or how big losing Jonathan Brooks is to this offense, big picture?
I mean, it's a few points, maybe even a touchdown. I think Vegas wise is probably a 3-4 point situation. I mean, some of it depends on how good CJ Baxter is going to be, how healthy he is. Cause I think talent wise, there's a reason he won the job coming out of summer camp, right? I mean, I think he's as talented, if not more talented than Jonathan Brooks, at least on paper. But what Brooks is able to do in a game, it's hard to quantify. Like, he's just a gamer. He's just a dude that plays maybe above his, more than his weight and size and speed would suggest, his recruiting profile would suggest. CJ Baxter's a 5-star guy. He's 10 games into his college season. He's been around. He was in there for spring. So he's more of a sophomore in terms of like what his body should be. I think that I don't think if Texas loses against, I'll put it this way. If Texas loses against Iowa State, I don't think it'll be because Jonathan Brooks wasn't there. I think it'll be because of other issues. I think with the offensive line, CJ Baxter, Jaden Blue, if he's given his opportunities, I think Texas will be good enough in the run game to win this. To me, it comes down to if Quinn can be careful with the football, because Iowa State does get a lot of turnovers, a lot of interceptions. And then we'll talk about the other side of the ball here in a little bit. For me, offensively, this is a Quinn Ewers football game. You tell me Quinn Ewers' stat line after the game, and I think I could give you a pretty good idea of who won.
Yes. And I'm with you. And this is where creativity for Sark's going to have to be big. I mean, how does he replace, because not just Jonathan Brooks in the run game for me, Mike, but also in the passing game.
Yeah.
Because Jonathan's so big and what they do on those screen games, the throwback screens. He had a big one last week at TCU. And this is where, and one of the things we've talked about, Rod Babers and I on the morning show, against this 3-high defense, which is the other thing about Iowa State, Mike, these safeties are huge. I mean, they got a big 6'4", 200-pound safety, 220. They got a 6'2" guy back there. I mean, these are like hybrid linebackers that execute this John Haycock system. That's, they disguise with their safeties, but then they can come down and run support and linebackers. I'll say this: with these big backers and a linebacker named Caleb Bacon. That's a great name, Caleb Bacon. CJ Baxter better not be tiptoeing around the edges here and up into this line, because they'll come up and smack you. That's what they do really well in run support. Here's a stat that you should know, and then remember on Saturday night. How many explosive runs has Jonathan Brooks had this year? The Iowa State defense has only allowed 4 20 or more yard runs this season, all year. So they don't give up explosive runs. They'll give up rushing yards, but they're not going to give up the big one, because they're sure tacklers and they're sound. So you're going to have to work your way down the field and work the run game. That's where the creativity I was going to, is it Savion Red who comes in and lines up with Quinn, and he can become the guy in the gadget plays and the screens and those kind of things. Maybe Jordan Whittington even into the backfield, but then spread and go empty. Because one of the things that the three high defense is vulnerable to is that empty set, because it has to tell you what it's doing immediately when you spread everybody out. And Quinn Ewers is good out of spread. So don't beat your head against the wall in the dark out or blackout in Ames without your best running back. Be creative. But that then drops you back into how healthy is Quinn Ewers? Is there a lingering issue with the shoulder, especially on what's going to be a cold night? I mean, for folks who don't know the weather, when you saw this come on the schedule, Mike, gosh, mid-November and Ames, you never know what you're getting. Longhorns are catching a break. It's going to be in the 40s, but it's going to be clear, and there don't look like there's any precipitation. But it'll be a colder night, which you wonder how that impacts Quinn Ewers' shoulder, because this could be a night where he's going to have to make a lot of throws and execute at a high level in the passing game.
Yeah, that Iowa State secondary is good. Like, they are opportunistic. They will make plays. Like you mentioned, they're sound. Like, when a guy catches the ball, that tends to be the end of the football play. But they're not as athletic as Texas. And to your point, I said this on your radio show. I think I said it in the midweek game. Even if Jonathan Brooks is there, Texas's best route for success offensively is to spread out these guys, put them into man-on-man coverage, and then let Xavier Worthy, let Mitchell, let JT Sanders, Jordan Whittington, all the talent you have outside, just win those battles. And you just win those battles 6 times out of 10, and then you win this football game. I hate to be reductive, but I do think that if Quinn Ewers throws 1 or fewer interceptions in this game, Texas wins and covers. If he throws 2 or more, it gets really, really interesting in Ames. And so that's the balance for Sark, is being aggressive, letting Quinn Ewers throw the ball and be the guy who dictates this game, but also figuring out a way to not put him in a position to where Iowa State tricks his eyes and then all of a sudden comes up with an interception.
All right, so yeah, that's key. Turnovers. They've forced 15 interceptions this year. They are opportunistic. They will come up and hit you. But as we said, Oklahoma put 50 and Dylan Gabriel threw for 366. You can create those matchups, and they can't guard A.D. Mitchell, J.T. Sanders, Xavier Worthy, and Jordan Whittington. They should have advantages on the outside, obviously, and that's where the weather catching a break helps. It's not supposed to be windy, no precipitation. You don't have to play one of these slobber games. You should be able to use it, win with your athleticism and your superior quarterback play, and the offensive line has to play well. The other thing without Jonathan Brooks is pass protection from the running back position. Sark was big that C.J. Baxter picked up a blitz on that big throw to A.D. Mitchell that sealed the TCU game. That corner blitz came. The young guy recognized it. And, this is a coming out party for him. He has a chance to really seize that opportunity and become the back of the future at Texas, because who knows how long Jonathan Brooks is out. He may be affected by this knee injury in the next season. C.J. Baxter needs to be the new bell cow running back at Texas, and this could be that signify that that's the case moving forward.
I have no doubts about his talent. If you can beat out the rest of that running back room to start as a true freshman in the first game of the season, you are talented. Sark knows what he's talking about. Tashard Choice, the running backs coach there, knows what he's doing. The issue with C.J. Baxter so far has been durability, and we have a very small sample size, but he's exited a few games now with some knocks. Maybe not a huge injury like the one Brooks suffered, but just kind of beat up and bruised. And so this Iowa State defense is going to be physical. As you mentioned, they are going to hit you. This is not going to be a finesse game. C.J. Baxter is 10 games in, about to be 11 games into his true freshman year. That's usually when coaches stop kind of relying on the freshman thing. Like, you're no longer a freshman anymore, especially if you're an early enrollee. Let's see how his body can handle this, because if he can carry the ball 15 to 20 times, he's just as good. Like, he can have a 100-yard game. He can have a big game. For the Longhorns, is just being able to handle the physicality of the college football game.
You've liked his vision so far, his ability to cut back and then
Yeah,
just
he's good.
power through the hole. He's a good player. All right, One Source Gas of Austin and Central Texas brings you our offensive look for Texas. One Source Gas is your lead CO2 provider in the service and hospitality industry here in Central Texas, also serving the medical industry. Many more. If you are a local owned or company and you use beer taps and if you need compressed gas, you know it, right? And if you're in the veterinary or hospitality, medical fields, let One Source Gas be your provider. Nitrogen, oxygen, propane, and many more, all throughout Central Texas now. Find them online at onesourcegasatx.com. Spell out the word one, O-N-E, onesourcegasatx.com. Over 12 years and still growing like crazy because they do it the right way. Onesourcegasatx.com, or call my buddy Richard Strever, 214-8484, 512-214-8484. All right, now our look at the Texas defense against this Iowa State offense, brought to you by Dr. Greg Eckert and his irrefutable research-based Brain Vault technology, more than a mouth guard, allowing you to play hard but play safe with Brain Vault. All right, Mike, flip it around now. Here's when you look at the numbers for Iowa State, nothing, Rocco Becht is their young quarterback, great name, making his way. He's much like them. Part of the reason they've improved is he's gotten better as the year's gone on. He's a young guy. They've got some pretty good backs, and they included a freshman out of Des Moines that was becoming their leading ball carrier, which we'll tell you about coming up. But here's the concern I have, because Matt Campbell is the he's the offensive mind, right? John Heacock runs the defense, so the offensive game plan is put together by Matt Campbell and the offensive staff, and they had a great game plan last year in Austin, right? And two things collide here. They did a great job of really exposing Texas. Remember last year when they scored 24 points and dropped a touchdown pass, Xavier Hutchinson had 10 catches for 150 yards, right? He's playing for the Houston Texans now. They had another guy, Jalen Noel, who's going to be in this game tonight, who had almost 90 yards and scored 2 touchdowns. They really exposed the Texas secondary and their inability to cover the bunch formations and pass off receivers with good communication. And by virtue of that, they went 9 for 15 on third down last year, Mike, in Austin, 9 for 15. And they converted a bunch of third and longs, where Texas's defense, like they do a lot, would get you in third and long because their run defense is so good. But then they would convert them with Hunter Deckers at quarterback. And that's my concern here for Texas on defense, is the secondary still seems out of sync. They still seem to not communicate. And they're going to, Matt Campbell's coming back with a lot of that same stuff to see if they can cover Texas, especially out of bunch formations and out of the formations they've struggled with, especially on those in-breaking routes that have just killed Texas over and over again here in the month of October into November. This is but the other part of this offense, Mike, they lean into their game plan. They're going to try to slow this game down. So if they convert first downs, they're one of the slowest teams in college football, the opposite of TCU. They want to be deliberate, move the chains, score some points, then use their defense to hold that lead. I mean, that's really their philosophy. It's old school, but if Texas can't get them off the field, it'll play right into what we're talking about.
Yeah, you nailed it. They're going to try to limit possessions here, try to make the Texas offense, only have 5 or 6 drives, right? Like Texas isn't going to have 70 plus snaps this week. They're just not going to. And that makes offensive efficiency really important. And to your point, that makes third down, even fourth down. Iowa State's over, nearly 70% conversion on fourth down, because they're so good on third down. They get into that 4th and inches. If they don't make it, then they go ahead and convert it. This feels like one of those games where the offense has to help the defense out, because it doesn't feel like Iowa State's that capable of going 80 yards on Texas. Like they're probably not going to go 13 play, 80-yard, put it in the end zone against the Longhorns. But if they're given short fields, if Texas secondary can't tackle in space, those are the type of things that will allow these Cyclones to get in there. I think this is a really interesting spot for Texas, because what we've seen over the first 10 games is something at the safety position that's fascinating to me. It's their best coverage guys don't tackle very well, and their best tackling safeties don't cover very well. And so if you're Kwiatkowski in that defense, what do you go to? Do you go to the young guys who are a little bit more athletic, like Derek Williams, and risk some open field tackles, but you're going to get a little bit better coverage because they're more athletic? Or do you ride a Jaron Thompson and Keaton Crawford and guys like that, who are physical and who will tackle you and who will strike you and who will hit you, but are maybe a step or two a little too slow to play man-on-man on the back end? And so I bet they mix and match, and we see a bunch of different safety combinations depending on the play and the series and the situation of the game. But to me, that's also been a hindrance, because it hasn't allowed any of those guys to get into a real flow back there. So we thought going into the year this was going to be about pass rush, and if Texas could get pass rushing on the defensive side, it's really been about the safety play and how well they play in coverage.
Agreed. I think that's very well said, that their best safeties. I haven't heard it put that way, Mike, but you're right. Watching this team, Derek Williams, probably their best coverage safety, but he's a freshman. He's not the best tackler yet at the D1 college level, the high D1. Keaton Crawford struggles in coverage. Keaton Crawford's probably their fastest safety, but he still has eyes like a corner a lot of times and doesn't understand the assignments. Jaron Thompson's probably your most, along with Michael Taff, your most assignment sound safeties, but they're limited athletically. Against really good receivers. We saw that again last week against the kid at TCU who was so darn good. That's a problem. And this is a team that they do have some receivers, and they will get after you with the passing game. They're going to try to be a run-based team. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they can run the football. Eli Sanders, our most consistent runner, but the guy that's really come on, another reason that they have improved, and he had a huge game against BYU last week, is a true freshman from Des Moines, Iowa. Amu Sama. Love the name. He's a kid right there out of Des Moines, but he's a guy. He's a freshman, but you got to get him to the ground. He'll remind you a little bit of what you saw last week with the kid at TCU, the running back Amani Bailey, who was so quick to the hole and jumping up in there. That gave Texas fits in the second half. They're going to have to be really good. The other thing with Rocco Beck, their quarterback, he's not going to run very much, so you know where he's going to be. He's just going to try to run this offense and manage this offense. This is an offense you should be able to get your hands around, but you've got to get them off the field, Mike. You've got to get them off of the field on third down. They could not do that last year, and it almost cost them the game.
And you can't let them get into the red zone. They scored 28 times out of 30 times that they're in the red zone. They are an efficient football team. They are good red zone defensively. They are good red zone offensively. They don't turn the ball over offensively. I think they only have 8 all year, interceptions and fumbles. They've only lost 1 fumble all year. Like, they're not going to give you the football game. Texas is going to have to earn this one by playing clean assignment football. Against the run, you'd imagine Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, the inside guys, like, they're not going to have much success guard to guard. But this is going to be another one on those linebackers that you got to have to set the edge. You need the defensive ends to help you out against the run support. Because as you mentioned, like Amani Bailey last week against TCU, if you can let their running backs get to the outside, like, they're quick, they're agile, they can make some guys miss, as we talked about the safeties and just the secondary not being maybe the best tackling unit on this football team. The linebackers are going to have a big one today, because Matt Campbell's going to dial some stuff up to confuse them, to get them running, to get them going in different spots, and then try to hit them on the edge.
Yeah, now Texas should have a big advantage on the D line, like they do usually, right? With Sweat and Murphy, the best 2 interior tackles in the country. And then on the edge, the Iowa State, you'll see him. They got a big 6'9", 300-pound tackle, but he's slow-footed, right? He's one of those guys that quickness should be a factor. Texas should be able to live in the backfield and get after this quarterback. Because if I'm PK, and I remember what happened last year on those third downs, I'm not giving my secondary a chance to turn it loose. I'm going to come after him. I'm going to come after this quarterback. And it's what he was doing last week to Josh Hoover. And then in the second half, they maybe backed off a little bit. Hoover got in a rhythm, got hot, and we all saw what happened. He had to survive the game by a coin flip, 29-26. We'll see if PK and maybe Sark, with some of his comments on Monday, hey, PK, let's keep this going. Let's go all gas all the way. And that's got to be on Sark. That's got to be on the coaches and the players. They're going to have to play 4 quarters of good football here to get out of Ames with a victory and get to 10 wins for the first time in Steve Sarkisian's career. Dr. Greg Eckert brings me my pearly white smile, which I love so much, restored teeth with Dr. Eckert, but also the Brain Vault technology, which allows you to play hard but play safe. This is research-based and proven by scientists that the mouth guard works and helps reduce the risk of concussions by aligning your jawline properly. And at that moment of contact, the collision point, everything's where it needs to be. Strengthens your neck muscles, and it absolutely works. It's also, in addition to being, research-based, it's been proven on the football field. Drew Pittman, Dr. Eckert's partner, for the last 8 years, over 100 of his players that he represents in the NFL have worn the Brain Vault technology. No concussions reported. Now they have a retail version for your young athlete in a collision sport. Just go to brainvault.com. Right there at the top, you'll see what is Brain Vault, and it'll explain everything I just said in a more in-depth way. And then you can set up a fitting because you got to be fitted for this mouthpiece and mouth guard. It's more than a mouth guard. It allows you to play hard, but play safe at brainvault.com. All right, Mike, third phase is special teams. How important do you think that is coming up with field position? You just mentioned Matt Campbell's team, kind of old school. They like playing the field position game. Special teams will be critical. And the punting team with Ryan Sanborn weren't as good last week. We had the big Savion Red penalty on an out of bounds thing. I think all three phases have to play a sharp 4 quarters here.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot, like routes of victory. Like how many ways do you have of winning this football game? To me, Iowa State needs some help from Texas, and that's going to be either turnovers or special teams mistakes or Iowa State stealing a possession or two with a fake punt, or Texas committing a penalty like they did against Oklahoma, where they ran into the punter that extends a drive that goes on to make points. I do think this Iowa State team, the way it's constructed and how it wants to play football, is going to have a difficult time going 80 yards against the physicality of the Longhorn defense. But if they have a couple good returns, if they get a couple interceptions, if the punt game isn't great, they block a punt or something like that, and they only have to go 40 or 50 yards, now all of a sudden they can win that way. This is going to be a low scoring game where every single possession matters, where every point probably matters, just like it has been the last 2 weeks. Special teams can absolutely turn this game if the Longhorns don't take that seriously. But they've been a pretty good special teams group. Overall, I think Jeff Banks is one of the better special teams coordinators in the country. But this game, it's going to be small margins. And that's what you get when you're in big time football games in November on the road.
Yeah, no question about that. And let's hope they get Keelan Robinson back, both in that return game. He's also the gunner on punt returns and blocking punts. And let's hope Keelan, he wasn't out there against TCU, and I think his loss was felt by the special teams unit. So special teams right there. Hey, let me tell you about our friends at Hayes City Store and Ice House. They're going to bring you some our next phase of our conversation. Hayes City Store and Ice House in Driftwood, Texas. Travis and Tamara Tyndall, absolutely the best. What a great spot, destination location. Got the indoor area, they got the outdoor ice house with TVs and sports and 53 beers on tap. And then under the canopy of oak trees there in the hill country, live music and a stage and picnic tables. Just a wonderful place to spend an evening, an afternoon watching football, enjoying your friends and family at Hayes City Store and Ice House. Check out the entire mouthwatering menu with that scratch Texas comfort food at HayesCityStoreTX.com. That's HayesCityStoreTX.com. All right, Mike, final thing I want to get into with you about Texas. When we'll get our picks coming up, we'll talk some coaching carousel conversations. But the Quinn Ewers story that developed since our last visit, Bobby Burton over at Inside Texas reporting according to his sources. And Bobby, of course, you've known Bobby forever. I have too, since, when in the 90s, he's been covering recruiting. So you follow a player like Quinn Ewers and you get to know his family. You have too. And according to Bobby's sources close to Quinn, that maybe there's a 90% chance that Quinn returns for another year at Texas. That's been, I don't want to say a foregone conclusion, but a lot of people believed along the way the Ewers family and Quinn wanted to be in the draft in April. That was always kind of the plan, but maybe now here because of the injury and the crowded quarterback class that we're seeing emerge, that maybe second thoughts, that maybe we're going to come back. And give me your thoughts on that, what you're hearing on that regard, and what you think it means for the Texas football program, big picture.
I guess my first thought was it's a victory for NIL, because this is an impossibility if you're not allowed to make some money as a college student, right? Like if the choice was zero money or go to the NFL draft, I think it'd be a pretty foregone conclusion that Quinn Ewers would be going to the NFL draft. But he could make a decent amount of money coming back to Texas and going and playing in the SEC in that first year. I'm glad, I would imagine that there's some motivation behind the scenes to keep him around for that as well. And so he doesn't have to make the choice anymore from being broke college student or going to the NFL. He can be rich college student, right? And I think an extra year in college would do him really well, to be developed by Sark for another year, to hopefully get a full season injury free under his belt to alleviate any of those concerns would be big for him. And then if you just look at the tea leaves, this year's draft class is loaded at the quarterback position. He's not getting drafted above Caleb Williams. He's not getting drafted above Drake May. You go into the next group of cycle, you start looking at the guys who are eligible for the 2025 draft. With a good year, a healthy year, Quinn Ewers could be the number one overall pick, or at least the number one quarterback taken off the board. So it'd be a smart decision. I think there's a long ways to go here. If he plays lights out the last 3 weeks, Texas goes in the college football playoff, he plays great there. Like everything can change here. But as of right now, with how he's played with his injury stuff, I think it's smart for the Ewers family to consider another year in college.
There you go. And obviously that, the quarterback room, this is a first world problem for Texas, who for 10 years was trying to find a quarterback. And now they have a lot of quarterbacks, a couple of 5 stars and Malik Murphy, a high 4-star. If he does announce he's coming back, I've been told by people close to Arch Manning that he's loves being a college student. It's funny to me that you have the Ewers family that always seems to have been fast tracked to the NFL. And it feels like the Manning family is the opposite. They want Arch to be slow tracked, right? They want it to be deliberate. He was through the recruiting process, right? He's not on social media. He had a hard time deciding whether he wanted to be an early enrollee because he wanted to play basketball and try to win back-to-back state titles at his high school there at Isidore Newman in basketball. So, and you heard there was an interview with Archie Manning that Arch is in a good place. He loves being at Texas. Give me your thoughts on that. That could be smoke. I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there that find it hard to believe that if Quinn Ewers announces he's coming back, that Arch Manning doesn't look to go play somewhere and sit behind Quinn next year. But what's your read on that whole situation?
Well, I think one, it points to how Arch isn't being counted on to be generational wealth, right? Like his future, at least his short-term future over the next couple of years isn't going to make or break who the Mannings are. Where like the Ewers family, like that, becoming an NFL draft pick and stuff. I mean, that obviously elevates what a family can do, what their worth is, and that kind of stuff. And so, I think for Quinn, that's always been kind of at least part of the motivation. That's why he skipped his senior year at South Lake Carroll, was to go to Ohio State. It wasn't to play early. He knew he wasn't going to play as an 18-year-old true freshman. It was to get some endorsement money, right? And so, again, I think this is more about NIL. I think Texas would lose Malik Murphy, obviously, if Quinn Ewers came back. But, I think Ewers is the better quarterback, so you're okay with that trade. And if you're Arch Manning, you look at it and you go, if I transfer to another school, one that's like Texas, that's competing for national championships, SEC championship, would I walk into that other place and start? And if the answer is no, well, then you're in the same spot at Texas as you are at that new school. If you like Sark, if you like the direction of it, if you're not in a hurry to be, maybe 3 years and done, if you're okay with playing 3 or 4 or 5 years of college football, I think it's a smart thing to do to stay. And I do think the other point here is it's clear that Arch isn't ready. If he was ready, he would have gotten some snaps during those 2 games where Texas didn't have Quinn Ewers and the offense struggled a little bit. Like he would have been in there during that Kansas State game or during the BYU game a little bit. We saw him during the spring. I hate to take, a huge leap from what we saw in the spring, but he doesn't seem like a quarterback who, if given the reins tomorrow, could go 11-1 and win a conference title and be in the Heisman discussion. If he knows he still needs some time, why not wait behind a Quinn Ewers who is injury prone, who you may get to play in some big games, even if he does come back. It'll be fascinating to watch for sure, because there's just so much going on with the portal and NIL and what quarterbacks are now. It's kind of a new age that we're figuring out how this stuff is going to play out in real time.
I think it's well said. I do think Malik Murphy would be gone, right? I think if Quinn was leaving, maybe Malik comes in, thinks he can compete with Arch next year. But there's going to be a lot of quarterback availability out there with all these, draftable quarterbacks, especially on the West Coast where Malik is from. And I think at this point, Sark and AJ Milwee would probably help him find a good spot for what he's done for the program and being there this year. But we'll see. That'll all play out. And I'd say this again for Longhorn fans who somehow they see this as a bad thing. Look, if Quinn Ewers comes back, you're talking about having a third-year, very talented starting quarterback in your move to the SEC. You couldn't ask for much more than that. A third-year veteran player, third year in the offense in the system, played a lot of football. That is how you want to enter the Southeastern Conference, folks. I promise you, especially considering you're probably going to lose your top 4 ball catchers from this year's team with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington and J.T. Sanders all off to their next phase, almost certainly. No Jonathan Brooks probably to start next year. So the other part so having Quinn Ewers would be huge because you're going to be looking at Jonte Cook and DeAndre Moore and Isaiah Nayer and probably hitting the portal again. So it's going to be a new crop of receivers. You want an experienced quarterback in that regard. And you're going to lose a ton on defense too this offseason. So that guy can cover up a lot to have a veteran starting quarterback. Look around and see what Michael Penix is doing and Bo Nix and these veteran quarterbacks that have played a lot of football. You just get better. That's the way that works. Funny how that goes as you get more and more reps in whatever you're doing. I'd also say for the Arch thing, Arch is continuing to help recruit players to this school, which, if you're leaving and you're not happy, this week the Longhorns got a commitment in basketball from a kid named Trey Johnson, who's the #1 player in the state of Texas. He's playing his senior year up in Missouri at an academy, but he's from McKinney, Texas. And Arch was influential on bringing him here. Arch was up to help recruiting him because Arch's a baller, Mike. Arch likes to play hoops. Yeah. And this guy's like, and so that to me tells me just how much he likes this place. He's helping to recruit the Colin Simmons of the world. He plans on being here. And he came here wide-eyed knowing that Quinn Ewers could very well be here for a couple of years. So chose it wisely. And I do think the Manning family wants him to enjoy his time. He's not taking NIL money while he's here unless it goes to charity until he becomes the starter. So I think it's all in a good place for Texas. And that would be great news for Texas for Quinn Ewers to return for another year, in my opinion. And that's your opinion too on the Eyes on Texas multicast. All right, Mike, before we talk some coaching carousel and what you're hearing, let's get some final predictions. At his Thursday media availability, Steve Sarkisian called Iowa State the scene of the crime, the scene of the crime, because it was in Ames 2 years ago that Sark says that the origination of the culture installation began, because he says he discovered that game told him all he needed to know: who was in, who was out, who was going to be a part of the thing moving forward, and who they needed to move on from. And of course, we remember the Bo Davis bus rant. Did the Longhorns avenge that 30-7 embarrassment loss 2 years ago, Mike? I think the Longhorns win this ballgame.
Yes, hashtag Bo Davis was right. I think that was a big turning point for this football team, and something that need to be said. I think Bo Davis said on that bus what a lot of Texas fans have been saying for over a decade, maybe even more than that. I think with the motivation that they have for what's still in front of them, all these guys on this team, as you mentioned, they're going to lose a lot of these players after this year. Like, they're not, we look forward to the SEC and what it means long-term, but most of this football team, or at least a lot of the starters on this football team, winning the Big 12 is the big thing that they can do. And leave their legacy at Texas. This is the game that you need to do it. You clinch a berth in the Big 12 championship game by winning this one. You avoid all the tiebreakers and weird stuff that the Big 12's doing. I think they go on the road. I think they win this game. I think they win in about 30-20.
30-20. I'll take 27-17 Texas. I think they get a 10-point victory, and that may come late to seal the deal. But I do agree. I think it's going to be a tough slog for a good stretch of this game, but I think the Longhorns will pull away. I just don't think Iowa State's offense is dynamic enough to score enough points to beat Texas. All right, so we both are taking Texas in this game, and I agree with you about the Bo Davis rant needed to be said, because it really was. If you don't remember that, Longhorns was 7-0 at halftime, got outscored. Didn't score a point in the second half, 30-7 final, and Bo Davis got on the bus, and some Longhorn players were joking and laughing, and that's when Bo Davis erupted. And to show the culture at the time, somebody recorded it. Somebody on the bus recorded the coach, which is, come on. That's junior high stuff. And so it went viral, but everything he said was spot on and needed to be said, and it's changed. It really has. And that's why I think they get this win. All right, let me tell you about our buddy Carlos Carrion, the Texas mortgage guy. Carlos was actually the first partner of ours on the Eyes on Texas multicast when Mike and I decided to do this and cover Texas football at a high level. Carlos was like, I want in. I want to be a part of that. Tell people about my service, which he does, which is mortgages. He's the best. He's a Longhorn fan. TheTexasMortgageGuy.com is the website. TheTexasMortgageGuy.com. Carlos, the best. If you need a new mortgage, as Carlos would tell you, the rates are high, yes. So you're not doing a lot of refis right now, but you can still buy a house here in Austin, Texas, especially for new builds. New builds are important right now. So get in on those, because builders are giving all kinds of points and incentives to get this done. Let Carlos bring it home for you with the best mortgage you're going to get, the best rate. He's not just going to get you a quote like anybody could do. He's going to be your roadmap to a solid purchase, because if you do get into that home right now, you can always refi and bring it down when the rates come down, but you'll own a piece of property in a home here in Austin, Texas, or Central Texas, still valuing like crazy. See Carlos Carrion for his time, new mortgage or refi. TheTexasMortgageGuy.com. Born and raised Austin, bleeds burnt orange. TheTexasMortgageGuy.com. Don't forget the THE at the beginning of that. All right, Mike, we both are picking Texas in this game in our Friday preview. Quinn Ewers has to have a big game. We know that, and play clean football. CJ Baxter needs to step up in the Longhorn defense. Keep this in mind if they lose this game. I guarantee you, we're talking about it on Monday in our recap, Mike. Third down defense. You have to get Iowa State off the field. If you can't, that's exactly the game they want to shorten this thing, keep the sticks moving, and force Texas to panic a little bit when they do get on offense, because they haven't had the ball in a while. That's the strategy for an overmatched team. And we'll see if they can pull it off, but we both like Texas. All right, Mike, the other big story outside of Quinn Ewers and the Longhorn chance to play in the Big 12 title game and clinch a spot is the coaching carousel. Jimbo Fisher out. That came down. We talked about it on our first edition of the week. What are you hearing in regards to that position and how it's kind of shaking everything that's happening in the Lone Star State as your work as the senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football?
Yeah, it makes me tired just thinking about everything that's probably going to happen over this next month. A&M was just the first domino. This is going to be a very busy, big year of coaching changes, I think, in the country, but especially in the state of Texas. The Aggies reached out to Dan Campbell, and that was kind of their first big swing. And they had to, right? I mean, I do not blame them at all. I think it was a long shot. I've never met a coach who would rather coach college than NFL because of the recruiting and the portal and all the things that happen on the college level. So it was a long shot, but you got to call the dude who is an alum of your program, who played there, who's doing so well at the NFL. I still feel like it's a Mike Elko, Jeff Traylor competition right now. As you said at the beginning of the show, you do not fire a coach that early unless you're trying to get a coach early. And to me, that eliminates a Dan Lanning or a DeBoer at Washington, because those guys are in national championship races. Duke's season isn't over, but what they've accomplished is already accomplished. UTSA season isn't over, but Jeff Traylor's not going to turn down the A&M job because he's got 2 weeks left of the regular season. So I think those two guys are who they're going after. I think they're good fits. A&M doesn't need a recruiter. They don't need a big name. They don't need a splash. They tried that with Jimbo and it didn't work. They need a program developer. I believe that with the NIL and the resources that all A&M has, that you and I could put together a top 15 class in the nation. You give somebody like Jeff Traylor the keys to that program, he'll put together a staff that can get a top 7, top 8 recruiting class in there. A&M's ranked 8th in the nation right now. They don't even have a head coach, and they're 11-11 in their last 22 games. Like, you're going to get talent to College Station just like you do to Austin. I do wonder if the alums would do something like that. Like, if they are waiting on a big splash name to come open, and maybe this thing lasts longer than we originally thought. But it does feel like they have two really good options in front of them, and Mike Elko, Jeff Traylor, and it'll be interesting to see what A&M does with that.
I agree with you. I mean, because I did see where Billy Lucci of TexAgs.com was on a radio show and said what you said, that they want to have somebody in place within the next 2 weeks. When the season's over, that coach has to hit the ground running to save the locker room that's here from the portal, but also recruit and put the recruiting class and finishing touches on it. Sark lamented that he didn't get here till January because Alabama was playing in the national championship game, and it put him kind of behind the 8 ball by the time he got here. As far as a recruiting class goes, but it's not impossible. So if you're A&M and you want to wait on Dan Campbell, but they might be in the Super Bowl, so that could be February if you really want Dan Campbell. I think that was a cursory visit. Aaron Glenn, by the way, the defensive coordinator in Detroit, is also an Aggie. I'm sure Dan maybe mention, what about Aaron? What about Aaron Glenn? But either way. But they're going to interview everybody. I agree with you. It's trending too, because Billy Lucci said they want somebody in 2 weeks. Well, that to me eliminates DeBoer and then Lanning. To reiterate what you said, the Deion Sanders name is going to be out there. Urban Meyer's not doing anything. If they are talking to Urban, trying to convince him to come back for one more run, that could be immediate. Obviously, Gary Patterson could be immediate if they wanted to go that direction. But I agree with you, Traylor. Traylor now has the endorsement of the Texas High School Coaches Association, which you're familiar with, Mike. I mean, come on. If they're putting their hand, but he's one of ours, well, they're going to help you recruit when you get there. I mean, those guys are going to be on your team because it's such a flagship university, or a flagship university in the state. To have one of their own coaching that team would be a big feather for the Texas High School Coaches Association, without a doubt.
I'm in trouble right now with my UTSA brethren, because I think it appears on social media and through articles as if I am pushing Jeff Traylor to be the A&M coach. And I think it'd be cool. I like Coach Traylor. I think he'd be great at A&M. Where I get upset, I hate this notion of the UTSA coach can't do it at A&M, because every single type of hire doesn't have a guaranteed success rate. Like, you can go splash hire, and that's not guaranteed to succeed. Jimbo Fisher just did that. You can go, coordinator that's high splash coordinator guy like Mike Sherman, and that didn't work out either, right? You can go G5 coach with Kevin Sumlin, and that didn't work out either. There's not this guaranteed route to being a great head coach. I would just go with a guy who's always been a good head coach, and Mike Elko has only done it for a couple of years, but if you can win at Duke, you can absolutely win at A&M. And if Jeff Traylor can win at UTSA, I was having this argument yesterday. They were like, how can he recruit at A&M? He's only recruited at UTSA. It's like, guys, it's harder to recruit at UTSA than it is at A&M. Like, what world are we living in where you think it's harder, the job at A&M, than it is at UTSA? I promise you, winning at the G5 level is harder. Like, maybe the week-to-week competition isn't the same, but there are so many hurdles that he would just not have at A&M. I think either of those two guys would be slam dunks for A&M. And my worry, if I'm an Aggie fan, is that they overthink this thing and come up with some big name, like you mentioned, in Urban Meyer, or they talk themselves into something else. And they hire a guy that doesn't understand the area, doesn't understand the fan base, doesn't understand the culture there. To me, that's the number one thing. Ross Bjork said it on Sunday. They want to find their next RC Slocum, that requires somebody who understands the lay of the land in College Station, because we can all admit it's a different spot. Those are different cats out there. You need to know what you're getting into. Both of those guys would for different reasons.
Yeah, Elko had been there, obviously did a great job at Duke and knows that locker room, and helped establish the culture that helped Jimbo Fisher get that big guaranteed contract, by the way. And it's kind of fallen apart since he left. And then Traylor from East Texas knows it, knows the school, knows every coach in the state, knows exactly what he'd be walking into. All right, we'll follow that, and obviously we'll be following with Mike on Dave Campbell's Texas football. All the coverage. What's going to happen at Houston when the season's over? What about Baylor? What about UTEP? All those schools will be, and then the dominoes really start falling. Mike, tell them again how they can be a part of the Dave Campbell's family and get all that great coverage, high school and college football.
Yeah, it's a great time. We got early signing period coming up. Greg Powers is a tremendous recruiting guy. He was at Scout and 24/7 for a long time, knows a lot what he's doing. So got early signing period coming up. I can say this without hesitation. We cover high school football better than anybody else in the state. With playoffs going, with state coming, there's no other better place to do that. We have a thing called Texan Live where you can stream all of the high school, football games and the playoff games. And then you get all the digital stuff, all the magazine stuff, and you can get all of that for $50 at texasfootball.com. So I encourage you for the whole year, $50 for the whole year. You get all the magazines, all the digital content, all the streaming stuff, all the recruiting for $50 a year. It's a really good deal. I'd imagine as we get bigger and bigger, somebody's going to come in there and be like, why are y'all giving away this shit for $50 a year? It's going to get more expensive. So get in there while you can. It's a busy time. It's a fun time. And coaching carousel season, I promise you, there's going to be at least 5 or 6 openings in the state this year. It's going to be crazy. Buckle up.
And it's going to be crazy in Ames, Iowa tomorrow night. That's the Longhorn next challenge on their quest to the Big 12 championship game. 2 more to go for the Longhorns. We'll be covering it like no other right here on the Eyes on Texas multicast. We are a product of the Republic of Football on Dave Campbell's Texas Football Podcast Network, powered by Grande Equipment and our other fine presenting partners, Carlos Carrion, the Texas Mortgage Guy, Hayes City Store in Driftwood with Travis and Tamara there, One Source Gas of Central Texas, and Dr. Greg Eckert for your dental work, but also for the Brain Vault technology, the mouthpiece, the mouth guard that is more than a mouth guard for sure, allows you to play hard but play safe. And then thanks, of course, to our presenting partners at Grande Equipment. Thanks to our digital producer, Nolan Hogan, our executive producer, Griffin Hogan, for their incredible work again this week. And thanks to our friend, Mike Craven. Mike, thanks a lot. You are bound for where this weekend?
Going to UTSA on Friday night, senior night. Frank Harris, Rashad Wisdom, the guys that really laid the foundation for what UTSA football has become. It's their last home game. And then on Saturday, I get to do a thing that I am jealous of everybody that gets to do this on a weekly basis. I'm going to hang out on my couch with my dogs and just watch football for like 15 straight hours. It's going to be tremendous.
I might do the same, Mike. But yes, we're looking forward to Texas, Iowa State. Got to wait till 7 o'clock at night, but games all day. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Hook 'em horns. That's the Eyes on Texas multicast. Find it on Spotify, iTunes, and the YouTube channels. Of course, on Dave Campbell's YouTube channel, and of course, the Horn in Austin at hornfm.com.